The rifle shot shattered the lamp just as the woman whispered, "I have nothing left." Glass struck the cabin wall. Caleb Rourke caught her by the coat and pulled her beneath the window. A second bullet punched through the log above his head. Snow blew through the hole and melted against his neck. Outside, a horse moved between the pines. Then came a man's voice. "Send Mrs. Bennett out, Rourke. This quarrel does not belong to you." Caleb pressed one finger to the woman's lips. Her breath came in short, white bursts. Blood ran from her hairline and slipped beneath her collar. Stay close to this winter night, because the choice Caleb made before dawn would open a road he had buried 12 years earlier. His cabin stood above Mercy Gap, Montana, 2 days from the nearest badge. Folks below called him a mountain man. Few had seen his face. The woman had reached his door minutes earlier. She wore one boot and a buffalo coat over her green dress. Ice covered her brown hair. She held a small wooden horse, blackened by fire. Now, 3 armed riders waited in his trees. Caleb crawled to the cold stove and lifted a loose floorboard. Beneath it lay a Henry rifle, oiled and wrapped in wool. His hand stopped above the stock. 12 years had passed since he carried that weapon through Mercy Gap. He took it anyway. "How many?" he asked. 3, she breathed. "Maybe 4. "Name?" "Clara Bennett." "Why do they want you?" Her fingers closed around the burned toy. A sharp edge cut her palm, but she did not loosen her grip. "My husband kept county records in Ash Hollow," she said. "Deeds, mine claims, payments made to Judge Mercer. Men lost farms because Gideon Vale bought ink and called it law." Caleb knew Vale's name. Vale owned Silver Crown, the freight road, and half the badges between Helena and Idaho. "Your husband copied the records," Caleb said. Clara looked at him. "He hid them in a railway strongbox." "And Vale needs the key." Her eyes dropped to the wooden horse. "Remember that scorched little toy?" Clara had carried it through 6 miles of snow, though touching it made her thumb shake. A boot crushed ice outside. Caleb rolled behind the table as another shot tore through the door. He fired once at the sound. A cry broke from the yard, followed by a body striking snow. The horses pulled at their reins. "Last warning," the voice called. "Give us the woman." Caleb worked the lever. "You came uphill to warn me?" he asked. Clara shook her head. "I did not know who lived here." "Then why this cabin?" "Smoke." The answer struck deep. For 12 winters, his chimney had meant only that one man had not frozen. Tonight, a thin gray line had drawn a hunted woman to his door. Caleb moved to the rear wall. He opened a narrow hatch hidden behind hanging pelts. A dark passage led into the mountain. "Old Prospect Tunnel," he said. "It comes out above the creek." Clara tried to rise. Her bare foot touched the floor, and her knee folded. Caleb caught her. The wooden horse fell open when it struck the boards. A brass key slid from its hollow belly. The man outside laughed once. "There it is, Mrs. Bennett. Your boy told us where you put it." Clara stopped breathing. She faced the door. Melted snow ran from her hair onto Caleb's hand. "My boy died in the fire," she said. "No," the rider answered. "Vale has him at Silver Crown. He stays alive until sunrise. After that, the gorge gets one more body." Clara lunged for the door. Caleb locked both arms around her and dragged her back as bullets split the latch. She struck his chest, then clawed toward the floorboards. No sound came from her mouth, only air, raw and broken. He saw the blackened toy beside the key. He saw another small hand from another winter, reaching through blowing snow in Mercy Gap, a hand he had been too late to catch. Caleb shoved the key into Clara's palm. Tunnel. Now. They will follow. Not where I'm taking you. He threw his bearskin coat around her shoulders, kicked open the hatch, and guided her into the rock. Then he pulled a red cavalry sash from the rifle chest and tied it around his arm. The riders outside went quiet. One of them had seen that sash before. "Rourke!" the man called, his voice lower now. "You put that uniform in the ground." Caleb opened the back window. Snow struck his face like sand. Below him, the hidden trail dropped toward Silver Crown. He raised the rifle and fired into the powder keg beneath his woodshed. The powder keg tore the woodshed apart. Flame rolled over the cabin roof. Horses screamed below the pines, and the riders fired at shadows through the falling snow. Caleb shut the tunnel hatch above him. Darkness swallowed Clara. She reached for the wall, but her fingers found his sleeve instead. "Keep hold," he said. He led her through rock so narrow that his shoulders brushed both sides. Water dripped from the ceiling. Behind them, boots struck the cabin floor. Someone had survived the blast. The passage climbed for 60 yards before opening beneath a shelf of stone. Caleb pushed through a curtain of frozen brush. Wind swept across the ridge and erased their tracks within seconds. Clara's bare foot had turned gray. Caleb tore a strip from his shirt, wrapped it, then gave her his left boot. "You cannot walk down a mountain like that," she said. "Neither can you." He lifted her onto his back before she could argue. Her arms settled around his shoulders. The burned wooden horse pressed hard between them inside her coat. Below them, Silver Crown burned with yellow lamps. Smoke climbed from its stacks. A cable carried ore buckets across the gorge, groaning over the black drop. "Where would Vale keep Owen?" Caleb asked. Clara's grip tightened. "The rider said my boy spoke. Owen bites his words when strangers stand near. He would never tell them about the key." Then Vale already knew. "How?" Caleb studied the mine road. "Someone read your husband's records before he hid them." The thought bent Clara forward until her forehead touched his shoulder. They followed a game trail down to an abandoned powder shed. Caleb set her beside a broken wall and watched the mine through field glasses. 6 guards stood near the main gate. 2 more watched the railway office. At the cable house above the gorge, a small shape sat beneath a hanging lamp. Clara rose too quickly. Stone scraped under the borrowed boot. One guard turned toward the ridge. Caleb pulled her down as a lantern beam swept over the shed. It paused on the wall, moved across their tracks, then vanished. Each step toward that mine drove the brass key deeper into Clara's wounded palm. Her son sat under the distant lamp, close enough to see and too far to touch. Caleb drew a map in the snow. "You go through the drainage pipe. It opens behind the railway office. Take the records and wait." "You are sending me away from Owen." "I am sending his mother where bullets will not find her." Clara wiped blood from her palm onto the buffalo coat. "My husband sent me out the back door while he faced Vale's men. I listened when he told me to run. The roof fell before I reached the creek." Her eyes stayed on the cable house. "Do not ask me to leave another person behind." Caleb rubbed his jaw. Ice clung to his beard. "Stay behind me," he said. They descended through pine roots and crossed the frozen creek. At the drainage pipe, Caleb entered first. Coal water soaked his knees. Rats scattered beneath the railway office. He raised the floor grate and listened. A clerk paced overhead, whispering numbers. Caleb climbed through, caught the man by his collar, and lowered him without a sound. Clara took the ring of keys from his belt. The strongbox stood behind a barred cage. Her brass key opened it. Inside lay no records, only her husband's silver watch. Its second hand was still moving. Clara held it near her ear. Her lips parted, but Caleb covered the watch with his hand. Footsteps crossed the platform outside. "Vale built a trap," Caleb whispered. A bell rang once from the cable house, then twice, then 3 times. Clara pushed past him. Owen knows that signal. They slipped beneath the loading platform as guards ran toward the main gate. The blast on the mountain had pulled half the mine uphill. Caleb and Clara crossed the yard under empty ore carts, then climbed the cable tower from its shadowed side. At the top, Owen Bennett sat tied to a chair. 10 years old, red hair, split lip, both eyes open. "Mama?" Clara reached him and cut the rope with Caleb's knife. The boy buried his face against her coat. His hands gripped the cloth as if the mountain itself were moving. Caleb turned toward the stairs. No guards followed. That was wrong. Owen pulled back and pointed above Caleb. A revolver clicked from the overhead walkway. Gideon Vale stepped into the lamplight, holding Clara's husband by a rope around his neck. The missing records were tied across the man's chest. "You were always good at finding people, Captain Rourke," Vale said. He pushed Clara's husband over the rail. The rope snapped tight. Clara's husband dropped below the rail, boots kicking above the gorge. Caleb threw down his rifle and lunged. His hands closed around Daniel Bennett's wrists. The rope cut beneath Daniel's jaw. His face darkened. Clara seized Caleb's belt. Owen wrapped both arms around his mother's waist. Gideon Vale fired. The bullet crossed Caleb's upper arm and struck the tower bell. Iron thunder rolled through Silver Crown. Caleb did not release Daniel. "Pull," he said through his teeth. Clara leaned backward. Her injured foot slid through coal dust. Owen planted both boots against a post and pulled with her. Daniel rose an inch, then another. His chest struck the rail. Caleb caught the rope, dragged him over, and cut the loop from his neck. His first breath came harsh, wet, slow, and uneven. Vale was already running down the far stairs. Caleb reached for his rifle. Daniel caught his sleeve. "The papers," he rasped. Clara tore the packet from his chest. The pages carried seals, names, and Vale's own marks beside every stolen farm. Daniel turned one sheet toward Caleb. It held an army order from 12 years earlier. Vale had paid a powder crew to blast Mercy Gap and cover the theft of a silver shipment. The blast buried settlers beneath half a mountain. A second order carried Caleb's copied signature. His wounded hand shook once above the page. Below them, a fuse sparked beside the main powder house. Vale had left them one final grave. Caleb could see him crossing the yard toward the cable station. One clear shot would stop him. The rifle settled against Caleb's shoulder. Then the fuse reached a patch of dry rope and burned faster. The old scar along Caleb's ribs tightened. In Mercy Gap, he had chased Vale and left the trapped wagons behind for 3 deadly minutes. This time, his boots turned toward the fire. Caleb lowered the barrel. He jumped from the tower stairs, landed hard on an ore cart, and rolled into the snow. Vale disappeared into the station while Caleb ran toward the powder house. 20 yards. 10. The fuse slipped beneath the locked door. Caleb fired through the chain, kicked the door open, and found 6 powder barrels stacked against the wall. The flame crawled under the first barrel. He seized the burning line with his bare hand and ripped it free. The fire died in the snow outside. Behind him, the cable engine started. Vale stepped into an ore bucket carrying a revolver and a leather money case. The bucket swung from the tower, moving over the gorge toward the north ridge. "Captain," Vale shouted, "you saved everyone again, and it still cost you everything." Caleb watched the cable. 3 bell strikes sounded from above. Owen stood at the tower controls. The boy pulled the brake lever. Vale's bucket stopped over open air. Miners poured from the lower camp, drawn by the gunfire and bell. Lamps spread along the gorge until Vale hung inside a ring of light. He fired toward Owen. Clara knocked her son down. The bullet broke the brake handle. The cable jumped, throwing Vale against the bucket wall. Caleb climbed the support ladder. He stepped onto the cable with blood running along his fingers. Wind pushed at his coat. Beneath him, the gorge vanished into blowing snow. Vale raised the revolver. "You should have stayed buried." Caleb kept walking. The hammer fell on an empty chamber. Vale looked at the gun, then hurled it. Caleb ducked. Vale climbed from the bucket and wrapped both hands around the cable. His polished boots searched for the narrow rim. One slipped. Caleb dropped to his knee and caught Vale's wrist. For a moment, both men hung between the cliffs. Vale looked up at the hand holding him. Then his free hand reached inside his coat and drew a small knife. Clara shouted from the tower. Vale drove the blade upward. Caleb opened his hand. Vale fell without a sound. His money case burst against the rocks below, sending banknotes across the snow. By sunrise, the miners had carried Daniel to the office stove. Clara cleaned Caleb's arm, while Owen sat beside him, holding the burned wooden horse. Daniel placed the records in a steel dispatch case. 40 miners signed their names across the lock strip before the morning train carried it to Helena. Weeks later, new boards covered the burned homes of Ash Hollow. Caleb stood on a roof beside Daniel, driving nails into fresh pine. Below them, Clara opened a schoolhouse door. Owen ran through the snow with the wooden horse raised above his head. Its blackened side now carried one carved word: Rourke. If you rode through Mercy Gap with them, subscribe and stay for the next frontier story.